The dust hadn't even settled when the announcement echoed across the viewing platforms of the Korthak arena.
Mira Chen, small even by human standards, stood at the edge of the combat circle with sweat dripping from her dark hair and blood staining her torn jumpsuit. Her chest rose and fell rapidly as she stared at the holographic display showing her final ranking.
99th place. Out of 100 participants.
The crowd of alien spectators erupted in a mixture of disappointed groans and amused chittering. Some had bet good credits on the human female, thinking her species' reputation for tenacity might carry her higher in the rankings. Others had predicted exactly this outcome, dismissing humans as a young race barely worthy of galactic attention. Mira wiped blood from a split lip and tried to ignore the burning shame in her chest. She had trained for 3 years for this moment, ever since the Galactic Combat Federation had grudgingly allowed humans to participate in the arena trials. These trials determined which warriors would be selected for the most prestigious and dangerous missions in known space.
The top 10 would become apex hunters, elite soldiers tasked with tracking down and eliminating the galaxy's most dangerous predators. The 50th through 10th place finishers would join various military units across the galaxy. Those ranked below 50th typically returned home to train for another year, hoping to improve their standing. But 99th place?
That was essentially a polite way of saying she should find another career path entirely. Disappointing, rumbled Vorthak, the massive reptilian creature serving as the trial coordinator.
His yellow eyes fixed on Mira with obvious disdain. Though not unexpected from such a primitive species. Perhaps humans should focus on less demanding pursuits.
Myra's jaw clenched, but she said nothing. Around the arena, other participants were receiving their assignments or consolation prizes. Zektar, the Vorthan warrior who had placed first, stood proudly as officials fitted him with the ceremonial armor of an apex hunter. His 4 arms flexed with deadly grace, each one capable of crushing a human skull with minimal effort. The second-place finisher was Lyra Keshin, a Andrathi female whose natural camouflage abilities had made her nearly unbeatable in the stealth portions of the trials. Her cat-like features remained composed as she accepted her position, though Mira caught a flicker of disappointment in her large green eyes. Everyone knew she had been hoping for first place. As Mira trudged toward the exit, her communicator buzzed with an incoming message. She almost ignored it, expecting another message of false sympathy from someone back on Earth. Instead, she found an encrypted transmission from an unknown sender.
Report to Docking Bay 7 in 1 hour. Come alone. Tell no one.
Under normal circumstances, Mira would have deleted such a suspicious message immediately.
But these weren't normal circumstances.
She had nothing left to lose, and curiosity had always been one of her defining traits. It was probably what had led her to sign up for these trials in the first place, despite everyone telling her she was too small, too weak, too human to compete. Docking Bay 7 was located in the industrial section of the space station, far from the gleaming arena complex where the trials had taken place. The corridors here were dimly lit and filled with the constant hum of recycling systems and cargo transporters. Myra's footsteps echoed off the metal walls as she made her way deeper into the station's bowels. She found the docking bay empty except for a single figure standing in the shadows near a sleek black spacecraft. As Mira approached, the figure stepped into the light, revealing herself to be Commander Vera Stellan, a legend among the apex hunters. Stellan was human, one of only 3 to have ever achieved that rank, and her reputation was built on taking down creatures that entire fleets had failed to stop. "You're probably wondering why I asked you here," Stellan said without preamble. Her voice was rough, scarred by years of breathing alien atmospheres and shouting orders over the sounds of battle. "The thought had crossed my mind," Mira replied, trying to keep her tone neutral despite the excitement building in her chest. "Meeting Vera Stellan was like meeting a living legend. I watched your trials. All of them." Stellan began pacing, her movements precise and economical. "Your combat scores were mediocre. Your weapon handling was acceptable but unremarkable. Your physical strength ranked among the lowest of all participants." Each word hit Mira like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain standing straight. She had heard it all before. "However," Stellan continued, "there were other aspects of your performance that caught my attention. When that Gordhak warrior tried to intimidate you before the hand-to-hand combat round, you didn't back down. When the maze trial seemed impossible, you found a solution no one else even considered. And, during the survival challenge, when your equipment failed, you improvised tools from materials everyone else had overlooked." Mira remained silent, unsure where this was leading. Tell me, Stellan said, stopping her pacing to fix Mira with an intense stare, have you ever heard of the Apex Protocol?
Only rumors, Mira admitted. Something about missions too dangerous for regular Apex hunters. Not too dangerous, Stellan corrected. Too unusual. The Apex Protocol deals with creatures and situations that don't follow normal patterns. Threats that can't be handled with conventional tactics or overwhelming firepower.
She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. There's been a situation developing on the outer rim world of Zirion Prime. Something that has already killed 2 teams of Apex hunters.
Myra's eyes widened. Apex hunters were considered nearly invincible.
The idea that something had killed not 1 but 2 teams was almost incomprehensible. The planet is home to a creature known as the Keth Moran, Stellan continued. Ancient texts describe it as the apex predator of its world, but those texts are over 1,000 years old.
We thought the species was extinct until 3 months ago, when a mining expedition went silent. What happened to them? Torn apart. But not randomly. The attack pattern showed intelligence, planning, even what could be described as malice. Stellan's expression darkened. The first Apex Hunter team was led by Torvash, one of the best warriors the Kandorian Empire ever produced.
He and his team were found scattered across 50 square kilometers of jungle, their weapons unused.
And the second team? Never found.
Only their ship, drifting empty in orbit with no signs of struggle aboard. Whatever took them was smart enough to get them off their own vessel without triggering any alarm systems.
Mira felt a chill run down her spine. Why are you telling me this? Because I've been authorized to put together a special team for this mission.
Not Apex hunters, but individuals with unconventional approaches to problem solving.
People who think differently than the standard warrior mindset. Stellan stepped closer. People who place 99th in the arena trials because they don't fight like everyone else. You want me to join a suicide mission because I'm a failure? I want you to join a mission that requires someone who can see solutions others miss. Someone who doesn't rely on brute force because they never had that option.
Stellan's eyes glinted with something that might have been respect.
The Keth Moran has defeated every conventional approach we've tried. Maybe it's time for an unconventional one. Mira looked past Stellan at the black spacecraft waiting in the docking bay.
It was smaller than she had expected for an Apex Hunter vessel, built for stealth and speed rather than overwhelming firepower. Just looking at it, she could tell it was designed for the kind of mission where coming back alive was considered a bonus rather than an expectation.
What makes you think I won't just get killed like the others? Honestly? You might. Stellan's bluntness was oddly refreshing after a day of polite disappointment and false encouragement.
But those other teams went in expecting to fight something they could understand, something they could overpower.
You've never had the luxury of expecting easy victories. How big is this team you're putting together? Small.
3, maybe 4 individuals at most.
Quality over quantity. Stellan gestured toward the ship.
There are others I'm considering, but I wanted to speak with you first. Your psychological profile suggests you have an unusually high tolerance for uncertainty and an ability to function effectively under extreme stress.
That's a polite way of saying I'm used to everything going wrong. Exactly.
Stellan smiled for the first time since their conversation began. Most warriors train to overcome obstacles through superior skill or firepower. You've trained to succeed when those options aren't available.
Mira considered the offer.
Going back to Earth meant facing the disappointment of her family, friends, and instructors who had believed in her potential. It meant admitting that humanity really wasn't ready to compete on the galactic stage. But accepting Stellan's offer meant walking into a situation that had already proven fatal to warriors far more skilled than herself.
If I say yes, when do we leave? Tomorrow morning.
There's no time for extended preparation or additional training. The mining company is threatening to abandon their operations on Zirion Prime entirely if we don't resolve this situation within the week. Stellan turned toward her ship, then paused. I should mention that this mission is classified at the highest levels.
If you agree to participate, you won't be able to contact anyone until it's completed. And if we don't complete it? Then, contact becomes a moot point. Mira looked around the empty docking bay, thinking of all the paths that had led her to this moment.
The years of training, the sacrifices her family had made to support her dream, the crushing disappointment of her trial ranking. All of it had brought her here, to this choice between safe failure and dangerous opportunity. "I need to know one more thing," she said. "Why humans? If this creature is as dangerous as you say, why not recruit from species with natural advantages? Better strength, speed, senses?" "Because," Stellan said, her expression growing serious, "every team we've sent has approached this creature as predators hunting prey." "But, what if that's the wrong paradigm? What if this situation requires the perspective of a species that evolved as both hunter and hunted?" The implication hung in the air between them. Humans were one of the few intelligent species that had evolved from persistence hunters rather than apex predators. They had learned to succeed through endurance, adaptability, and social cooperation rather than individual dominance. "You think differently because you had to," Stellan continued. "Your species survived not by being the strongest or fastest, but by being the most stubborn and creative. Those might be exactly the qualities needed here." Mira made her decision. "I'll do it." Stellan nodded as if she had expected nothing else. "Good. Be here at 0800 tomorrow. Bring minimal personal items. Everything else will be provided." She started to walk away, then turned back one final time. "And, Mira? Stop thinking of yourself as a failure. The arena trials measure one very specific type of combat ability. What we're about to face requires a completely different skill set." As Stellan disappeared into her ship, Mira remained standing in the docking bay. For the first time since the trial results had been announced, she felt something other than disappointment and shame. It wasn't quite hope, but it was close. She had placed 99th in the arena trials. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly where she needed to be. The next morning came faster than expected. Mira arrived at Docking Bay 7 carrying a small duffel bag containing her few personal possessions. The black ship's cargo ramp was already lowered, and she could hear voices from inside. "You're punctual," Stellan said as Mira entered the ship's main compartment. "Good. I want you to meet the others." The main compartment was larger than it had appeared from outside, but still cramped by military standards. Two other figures sat at a small table, both turning to study Mira as she entered. The first was another human, though unlike any human Mira had ever seen. He was tall and thin to the point of appearing gaunt, with pale skin that suggested he spent most of his time in artificial environments. His eyes were an unusual silver color, enhanced by cybernetic implants that gave him an unsettling, calculating stare. Marcus Webb, he introduced himself with a slight accent Mira couldn't place. "I specialize in xenobiology and behavioral analysis. Stellan found me studying the feeding patterns of void parasites in the Kepler Nebula." The second figure was clearly not human, though determining her exact species proved difficult. She appeared to be some kind of hybrid, with the basic humanoid structure of a dozen different races but features that didn't quite match any of them. Her skin had a slight blue tint, her ears were pointed like an Androthi's, but her eyes were the solid black of a deep space dweller. "Kira," she said simply when Mira looked at her expectantly. "No last name, no species designation. I'm what happens when you grow up on a trade station with no questions asked about parentage. Kira has unique advantages for this mission," Stellan explained. "Her mixed heritage gives her sensory abilities that purebred individuals lack, and her unconventional upbringing means she thinks outside normal social and tactical frameworks." Translation, Kara said with a wry smile, "I'm really good at staying alive in situations where normal people would panic and die. And I suppose I'm here because I'm really good at failing upward?" Mira asked, taking a seat at the table. "You're here because you're really good at finding solutions when the obvious ones don't work," Marcus said, studying her with those unsettling silver eyes. "I've reviewed your trial performance. Your approach to the maze challenge was particularly interesting. Instead of trying to overcome the obstacles, you found a way to make them irrelevant." Before Mira could respond, the ship's engines hummed to life. Stellan moved to the pilot's seat, her hands dancing over controls with practiced efficiency. "We'll reach Zirion Prime in 18 hours, she announced. "That gives us time to review everything we know about the Kethmoran and develop our approach." As the ship pulled away from the space station, Mira watched through the viewport as the arena complex grew smaller. Somewhere in there, the top-ranked warriors from the trials were probably celebrating their victories and planning their glorious careers. She was heading toward a planet where 2 teams of elite soldiers had already died. Somehow, that felt exactly right. The journey to Zirian Prime gave the team time to study everything known about the Kethmoran, which turned out to be frustratingly little. Ancient texts described it as a creature of immense intelligence and adaptability, capable of mimicking the behavior patterns of its prey before striking. But those same texts were filled with mythological language that made it difficult to separate fact from legend. According to the Valdorian chronicles, the Kethmoran was called the Shadow of Intentions, Marcus said, scrolling through data on his handheld device. It supposedly could predict what its prey would do before they knew themselves. That sounds like mythology, Mira said, though something about the description made her uneasy.
Does it?
Kira asked from where she sat cross-legged on the floor, her eyes closed in what appeared to be meditation.
Or does it sound like a predator that evolved alongside intelligent prey? The question hung in the air as they continued their research. The more they learned, the more disturbing the picture became. The mining teams that had disappeared weren't random victims. They had been specifically targeted, isolated, and eliminated with surgical precision. Look at this, Marcus called up a holographic display showing the mining facility's layout. The initial attack took out the communication array first, then the power grid. But not all at once.
The creature disabled their ability to call for help, then spent hours systematically hunting them down.
Hours? Mira studied the timeline. Why take so long? Maybe it was learning, Stellan suggested from the pilot's seat. Each kill teaching it more about human behavior and tactics.
The thought sent a chill through the cabin. They were heading towards something that had not only killed trained soldiers, but had potentially learned from those encounters. Zirian Prime appeared on their screens as a green and brown world, heavily forested with scattered mountain ranges. The mining facility was located in a valley surrounded by dense jungle, accessible only by air or a narrow canyon pass that would leave any ground team dangerously exposed. The facility is still powered, Marcus observed as they entered orbit. Emergency generators are running, but there's no response to our hails.
Life signs? Stellan asked. Negative.
Whatever happened here, there are no survivors. They landed on the facility's main pad, a circular platform carved from the living rock of the valley floor. The surrounding jungle pressed close on all sides, a wall of green that seemed to pulse with hidden life. Strange sounds echoed from the depths of the forest, calls and responses that didn't match any known animal species.
Stay together, Stellan ordered as they disembarked. Whatever took the mining teams is still out there. The facility itself was a maze of prefabricated structures connected by covered walkways. Solar panels and communication arrays sprouted from the rooftops, though many showed signs of precise damage. Someone or something had targeted the colony's infrastructure with surgical accuracy.
This way, Kira said, pointing toward what appeared to be the main operations building. I can smell traces of whatever happened here. They moved in formation, weapons ready, but the facility felt empty in a way that went beyond mere abandonment. It was as if the very air had been drained of life, leaving behind only echoes and shadows. The operations building's main door stood open, hanging askew on damaged hinges. Claw marks scored the metal, but they were unlike anything in the team's xenobiology databases. They were too precise, too deliberately placed to be the result of mindless animal fury. Inside, they found the first signs of what had happened to the mining team. 73 personnel, Marcus read from a duty roster posted on the wall.
Miners, technicians, security staff. All accounted for in the personnel logs until 3 months ago.
The main operations center told a story of panic and confusion. Control consoles had been smashed, but, again with deliberate precision. The creature had destroyed only the equipment necessary to prevent outside communication, leaving other systems intact.
It wanted to keep them isolated, Mira realized.
Cut off from help, but not necessarily from each other initially. They found evidence of barricades that had been built and, then, methodically torn apart. The facility's security team had tried to establish defensive positions, but their efforts had been systematically countered by something that seemed to understand human tactical thinking. Look at this, Kira called from across the room. She stood beside a wall where someone had scratched a message into the metal with desperate fingers. IT knows what we're going to do.
Psychological warfare, Stellan said grimly. The creature didn't just kill them.
It terrorized them first.
They continued their investigation, moving deeper into the facility. Each room told part of the story.
The creature had isolated the mining team, cut off their communications, then began hunting them with methodical patience. But there was something else, something that didn't fit the pattern of a simple predator. In the facility's cafeteria, they found tables and chairs arranged in a perfect circle, far too precise to be the result of chance or struggle. In the medical bay, surgical instruments had been laid out with clinical precision on operating tables that showed no signs of use. "This isn't predatory behavior," Marcus said, his enhanced eyes scanning the arranged instruments. "This is artistic expression. Or communication," Mira suggested. "Maybe it was trying to tell us something. What could it possibly want to communicate?" Stellan asked. Before anyone could answer, the facility's emergency lighting flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. Emergency backup systems engaged moments later, bathing everything in an eerie red glow. "That's impossible," Marcus said, checking his scanner. "The power grid was stable when we arrived." A sound echoed through the corridors, something between a growl and a whistle that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It was answered by another sound from a different direction, then another, until the entire facility seemed to ring with inhuman voices. "Multiple contacts," Stellan said, her weapon raised. "But I'm not reading anything on the scanners." "It's here," Kira whispered, her hybrid senses detecting something the others missed. "Not it. Them. There's more than one." The realization hit them like a physical blow. All their intelligence had assumed they were dealing with a single creature, but the sounds surrounding them suggested otherwise. The Kathmoran wasn't just one apex predator. It was a pack. "We need to get back to the ship," Stellan ordered, but even as she spoke, they could hear sounds from the direction of the landing pad. Metallic scraping, the unmistakable sound of claws on hull plating. "They're at our ship," Marcus said, his face pale in the red emergency lighting. They were trapped. The sounds grew closer, echoing through the corridors with deliberate menace. Whatever the Kathmoran were, they weren't rushing to attack. They were taking their time, savoring the hunt. "The mining tunnels," Mira said suddenly. "If this is a mining facility, there have to be underground passages." "That could just trap us deeper," Stellan pointed out. "Or give us options they don't expect." Mira was already moving toward what appeared to be a service elevator. "These creatures have learned to counter human tactics by studying our previous encounters. But they've only seen military approaches." "What are you thinking?" Kira asked, following her toward the elevator. "I'm thinking we stop trying to fight them like soldiers and start thinking like miners." The service elevator descended into the mining complex's underground levels. Here, the facility transformed from prefabricated buildings into carved tunnels that burrowed deep into Zirian Prime's bedrock. The air was thick with dust and the lingering smell of excavation equipment. "The main mining shaft goes down over a kilometer," Marcus said, studying a schematic on his device. "There are dozens of side tunnels, most of them unmapped." "Perfect," Mira said. "We need to split up." "That's exactly what they want," Stellan protested. "Divide and conquer." "No, that's what they expect us to think they want." Mira activated her suit's communication system, making sure the others could hear her over the increasing sounds of pursuit. "They've learned to counter human military tactics. But they've never faced humans who weren't trying to win a fight." "Explain." "Every team they've encountered has tried to overcome them through superior firepower or tactical positioning. But what if we're not trying to win? What if we're trying to understand?" The elevator shuddered to a stop at the lowest level of the mining complex. Here, the tunnels stretched away in all directions, carved from rock that glittered with traces of exotic minerals. Emergency lighting cast dancing shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. "You want us to let them hunt us," Marcus said, understanding dawning in his enhanced eyes. "I want us to observe them hunting us," Mira corrected. "The previous teams died because they tried to fight something they didn't understand." "But what if understanding it is more important than surviving it?" "That's suicide," Stellan said bluntly. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the only way to learn what we need to know." Mira checked her suit's recording equipment. "Marcus, your xenobiology background makes you perfect for documenting their behavior patterns. Kira, your senses can track them in ways our scanners can't. Stellan, your combat experience can help us survive long enough to gather the data." A new sound echoed down the elevator shaft, a rhythmic scratching that suggested something large was descending toward them. They're coming, Kara whispered.
Then, we need to move.
But, we move as observers, not fighters.
Mira turned to face the others. If I'm wrong, we die. If I'm right, we might learn something that saves future teams.
And, if we're very lucky, Marcus added, we might survive to share what we learn. They split up as planned, each taking a different tunnel with their suit communicators maintaining contact. The idea went against every military instinct, but Mira was beginning to understand that military instincts were exactly what had gotten the previous teams killed. The tunnels were a maze of passages that branched and reconnected in patterns that followed mineral veins rather than logical design. Emergency lighting provided minimal visibility, creating pools of red light separated by stretches of darkness. The walls were rough-carved stone, still showing the marks of mining equipment. Mira had been walking for perhaps 10 minutes when she heard the first direct evidence of pursuit. Footsteps, but not quite right. The rhythm was wrong for any known bipedal species, suggesting something that moved with multiple legs or appendages. Contact, she whispered into her communicator.
Something following my trail.
Same here, Kara responded. But, it's staying just out of visual range.
Confirmed, Marcus added. They're tracking all of us, but not attacking. That was interesting.
The Kethmoran were clearly capable of moving through the tunnels, but they weren't immediately closing for the kill. They were doing exactly what Mira had hoped they might do.
They were learning.
Keep moving, Stellan's voice came through the comm, but document everything. If this goes badly, the recordings might help the next team.
Mira activated her suit's full sensor suite, recording everything from air quality to seismic vibrations.
The creature following her was being remarkably stealthy, but it couldn't completely mask its presence. She caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, shadows that moved independently of the emergency lighting. After 20 minutes of careful stalking, the pattern changed. The footsteps stopped. I've lost contact with my pursuer, Mira reported. Same, came the unanimous response from the others.
An uncomfortable silence settled over the communications channel.
The Kethmoran had been methodically tracking each team member, learning their movement patterns and behavior.
But, now they had simply stopped. That's not good, Stellan said.
Predators don't usually break off pursuit unless they have a better strategy. Or unless they've learned what they wanted to learn, Marcus added ominously.
A new sound echoed through the tunnels, unlike anything they had heard before.
It started as a low humming that seemed to come from the rock itself, then gradually resolved into something that almost sounded like singing.
Are they communicating? Kira asked. It's possible. Many pack hunters use vocalizations to coordinate hunts.
Marcus was clearly recording everything, his scientific mind working even in the face of mortal danger. The singing grew more complex, with multiple voices joining in harmonies that shouldn't have been possible from animal throats. It was hauntingly beautiful, and utterly terrifying.
We need to regroup, Stellan ordered. This level of coordination suggests they're planning something.
But, as the team members began moving toward their predetermined rally point, they discovered something that changed everything. The tunnels had been altered. This passage wasn't here before, Mira said, staring at an opening that definitely hadn't existed during her initial survey. The edges were smooth, as if the rock had been melted rather than carved.
Impossible, Marcus said. Rock doesn't just rearrange itself. Maybe the Kethmoran can manipulate their environment, Kara suggested.
Some species have that ability. They were beginning to realize that they weren't just dealing with intelligent predators. They were dealing with creatures that could alter the battlefield itself, changing the very structure of the mining complex to suit their needs.
The singing grew louder, more insistent, and now they could hear another sound underneath it. Something that sounded almost like laughter.
They're playing with us, Stellan said grimly.
No, Mira said, a new understanding dawning. They're trying to communicate with us. Communicate what? I don't know yet. But, I'm starting to think that's what we need to find out.
The deeper they went into the mining complex, the more obvious it became that the Kethmoran were not simply animals. The tunnels showed signs of deliberate modification, with passages widened or narrowed in ways that served no obvious mining purpose. Strange symbols had been carved into the walls, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed from different angles. This is deliberate architecture, Marcus said, running his enhanced eyes over the carved symbols.
These aren't random markings. They're mathematical. Mathematical how? Mira asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. They're describing geometric relationships. Spatial coordinates. This symbol here, he pointed to a complex spiral pattern, it's actually a three-dimensional map of the tunnel system. They're not just using the mines, Kara realized. They're redesigning them. The implications were staggering. The Kethmoran weren't simply predators that had moved into abandoned human structures. They were engineers, architects, possibly even scientists. The mining complex was being transformed into something else entirely. We need to find the source, Stellan said, studying the mathematical symbols. If they're redesigning this place, there has to be a central hub, a control center of some kind. The singing that had been echoing through the tunnels began to change, becoming more complex and layered. Individual voices separated from the chorus, creating intricate harmonies that seemed to convey specific information. It was language, Mira realized. An incredibly sophisticated form of musical communication. They know we're listening, she said. The patterns are changing in response to our presence. Can you understand any of it? Marcus asked. Not the content, but the structure. It's not random. There are repeating themes, variations on basic patterns. They're trying to teach us their language. The team continued deeper into the complex, following the mathematical symbols that seemed to serve as a navigation system. The tunnels grew larger as they descended, opening into vast chambers that the original miners had never discovered. Here, the transformation was even more obvious. The walls had been reshaped into flowing, organic curves that created perfect acoustics for the Kethmoran's musical communication. Crystals had been cultivated from the native rock, forming geometric patterns that pulsed with their own inner light. The entire space felt alive, as if the mountain itself had been awakened and given purpose. This is impossible, Marcus breathed, recording everything his enhanced eyes could capture. The level of engineering required to reshape solid rock like this, it would take decades with our best technology. Maybe time works differently for them, Kira suggested. Or maybe they've been here longer than we thought. As they explored the transformed chambers, they began to find evidence of the missing mining teams. But it wasn't what they expected. Personal belongings had been carefully arranged in geometric patterns, each item placed with deliberate precision. Tools and equipment had been disassembled and reconstructed into abstract sculptures that somehow conveyed emotional meaning. It was as if the Kethmoran had studied every aspect of human civilization through the possessions of their victims. They're not just killing humans, Mira said, studying a sculpture made from mining equipment that somehow managed to convey profound sadness. They're trying to understand us. The previous teams, Marcus said slowly, maybe they weren't killed because they were threats. Maybe they were killed because they were specimens. The thought was chilling, but it explained the systematic nature of the attacks. The Kethmoran weren't hunting for food or territory. They were conducting research, studying human behavior and technology with the same scientific curiosity that human xenobiologists might show toward a newly discovered species. But why? Stellan asked. What could they possibly want to learn from us? Their answer came when they reached the heart of the complex. The central chamber was a vast spherical space that had been carved from the living rock with impossible precision. The walls were covered with mathematical equations and star charts that showed a level of astronomical knowledge that rivaled anything in the galactic database. At the center of the chamber hung a three-dimensional holographic display that showed the local galaxy in perfect detail. And, around the display, studying it with intense concentration, were the Kethmoran. They were nothing like what the team had expected. Where the ancient texts had described monstrous predators, the creatures before them were elegant and graceful. They stood roughly 3 meters tall on 4 legs that seemed to be made from living crystal. Their bodies were translucent, revealing internal structures that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. Most remarkably, they possessed multiple heads on flexible necks, each one apparently capable of independent thought while contributing to a collective intelligence. "They're beautiful," Kira whispered. The Kethmoran became aware of the team's presence immediately, but their reaction wasn't aggressive. Instead, they began to sing, their multiple voices creating harmonies of incredible complexity. The holographic display responded to their song, zooming in on specific star systems and displaying data that scrolled past too quickly for human comprehension. "They're showing us something," Mira realized. "This isn't a trap. It's a presentation.
The largest of the Kethmoran, distinguished by the golden patterns that flowed through its crystalline body, stepped forward. When it spoke, its voice was a harmony of tones that somehow resolved into recognizable human language. "Welcome, persistence hunters," it said, the words carrying undertones of respect and curiosity.
"We have been waiting for your kind to send representatives capable of understanding." "Understanding what?"
Stellan asked, her hand still on her weapon but no longer pointing it at the creatures.
"The truth of why we have been studying your species."
The Kethmoran gestured toward the holographic display with one of its delicate appendages.
"You call us Kethmoran, but we are the SITHTI, the bridge builders. We are explorers, like yourselves."
The display shifted, showing star charts that revealed the true scope of their civilization.
The SYTHTI weren't native to Zirion Prime.
They were nomads, traveling between worlds in search of something that the team was only beginning to understand. "We have traveled the galaxy for millennia," the creature continued, "seeking species that share our passion for exploration and discovery. Most civilizations we encounter are content to remain within their own systems, building empires based on conquest and resource extraction.
But your species is different." "Different how?" Marcus asked, his scientific curiosity overcoming his fear.
"You explore not because you must, but because you cannot help yourselves. Even when faced with impossible odds, humans continue to push into the unknown.
This quality is rare in the galaxy. Perhaps unique." The hologram shifted again, showing the migration patterns of human civilization.
Even in the few centuries since achieving spaceflight, humanity had spread across dozens of systems, driven by an insatiable curiosity about what lay beyond the next star.
"The mining teams," Mira said, understanding beginning to dawn. "You were studying them to learn about human exploratory behavior."
"Yes, but our methods were flawed.
We underestimated the psychological trauma our observations would cause."
"Your species does not respond well to being studied without consent." The SYTHTI's voice carried what sounded like genuine regret.
"The deaths were not intentional.
We sought to understand human reactions to isolation and stress, but we failed to account for the permanent nature of human psychological damage."
"You killed them by accident?"
Stellan asked, her voice hard with disbelief. "We killed them through ignorance. For our species, consciousness is collective. Individual death is traumatic but not permanent, as our memories and experiences are shared among the group.
We did not understand that human consciousness is individual and finite." The explanation was both horrifying and strangely reassuring.
The SYTHTI weren't malevolent, just operating from a completely different understanding of what life and death meant.
"The Apex Hunter teams," Marcus said. "What happened to them?"
"They approached us with the intention of destruction, so we defended ourselves. But even in defense, we tried to learn. Your warriors are efficient, but they lack the adaptability that makes your species truly remarkable." The SYTHTI moved closer to the holographic display. "We have studied dozens of human settlements and expeditions. In every case, we see the same pattern. Humans succeed not because they are the strongest or fastest, but because they refuse to accept failure as permanent."
"So what do you want from us?" Kira asked.
"Partnership." The word hung in the air like a musical note.
"We have discovered something in the deep void between galaxies.
Something that challenges our understanding of existence itself.
We believe it may be connected to the origins of consciousness in the universe."
The hologram shifted one final time, showing a region of space so distant it was beyond the edge of known galactic maps.
There, in the darkness between galaxies, something waited.
The image was unclear, but it suggested structures of impossible size and complexity. "We have the knowledge and technology to reach this discovery, but we lack the psychological flexibility to understand what we might find. Your species has qualities we need. The ability to adapt to the impossible. To find solutions when none exist.
To persist in the face of absolute uncertainty."
Mira felt her heart racing. This was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The SYTHTI were offering humanity a chance to participate in galactic exploration at a level that no other species had achieved. What would this partnership entail, she asked.
Exchange of knowledge and resources. We share our technology and understanding of the galaxy.
You share your unique problem-solving abilities and adaptability.
Together, we explore the ultimate unknown. And the humans you've already killed? Stellan asked. How do we know you won't simply continue your research methods? Because you have taught us a better way. This conversation proves that cooperation yields superior results to covert observation.
We propose formal contact with your governing bodies, full disclosure of our presence and intentions. Marcus was recording everything, but Mira could see the conflict in his enhanced eyes. This was the discovery of a lifetime, but it came at the cost of human lives already lost. We're not authorized to make decisions for our entire species, she said.
No, but you can serve as advocates. Ambassadors.
You have survived our flawed first contact and proven capable of understanding our true nature. The SYTH's voice carried harmonics of hope.
Will you carry our proposal to your leaders? Before anyone could answer, Kara spoke up. The Cubs. What? Stellan asked. The title of our mission. She placed 99th in the arena trials, yet when the apex roared, she emerged carrying its cubs. I thought it was just a dramatic description, but it's literal, isn't it? The SYTH's crystalline bodies pulsed with what might have been amusement. Your linguistic metaphors are fascinating.
Yes, in a sense, you will be carrying our young into a new understanding.
Not biological offspring, but ideological ones.
New concepts that will grow and develop within your civilization. Mira looked at her teammates, seeing her own wonder and terror reflected in their faces. They had come here expecting to hunt a monster. Instead, they had discovered potential allies in an exploration that could redefine humanity's place in the universe. We'll need proof, she said finally.
Something to convince our leaders that this isn't an elaborate deception.
Of course. The SYTHI gestured, and the holographic display condensed into a small, crystalline device that floated toward Mira. This contains detailed star charts of regions beyond current human knowledge, along with communication protocols for establishing formal contact.
Mira caught the device, feeling its surprising warmth against her palm.
It pulsed with internal light that seemed to respond to her touch.
There is one more thing, the lead SITHI said. The artifact also contains genetic templates for biological enhancements that would allow humans to survive in environments that are currently lethal to your species. Deep space, high radiation zones, worlds with exotic atmospheres.
You're offering to help us evolve, Marcus said, his scientific mind clearly racing with possibilities.
We're offering to help you adapt to challenges you haven't yet imagined. The space between galaxies is not empty, and what waits there may require capabilities that no current species possesses.
As the team prepared to leave, carrying with them proof of the most significant first contact in human history, Mira couldn't help but think about the path that had brought her here.
She had failed the arena trials, ranking 99th out of 100.
But that failure had led her to this moment, to this discovery that could change everything. One question, she said as they reached the chamber's exit.
Why didn't you just reveal yourselves immediately? Why the secrecy and misdirection?
Because, the SITHI replied, we needed to be certain that your species could understand us rather than simply fear us. The teams that came before approached us with violence and suspicion. You approached with curiosity and openness. This told us what we needed to know about humanity's true potential. The journey back to their ship was surreal. The SITHI had restored the original tunnel configuration, making navigation simple. As they walked through passages that showed no sign of the architectural modifications they had witnessed, Mira wondered if anyone would believe their story. But the crystalline device in her hand pulsed with warm light, a tangible reminder that everything had been real. They had made contact with a civilization so advanced that their technology seemed like magic, and somehow found common ground based on shared curiosity about the unknown. When they reached their ship, they found it exactly as they had left it, with no sign of the damage they thought they had heard. The SITHI had been testing them from the beginning, creating scenarios designed to assess their reactions and capabilities. Command is going to think we're all suffering from shared delusions, Stellan said as they prepared for departure.
Maybe, Mira replied, settling into her seat for the journey home.
But they'll have to take us seriously when we show them star charts for regions they've never mapped. As Zirian Prime fell away behind them, Mira thought about the implications of what they had discovered. Humanity was being invited to join an exploration effort that could reveal the deepest mysteries of existence itself. The price of admission was adaptability, persistence, and the willingness to embrace the unknown. All qualities that had led to her ranking 99th in the arena trials. Perhaps failure, she thought, was just another word for being perfectly suited to challenges that hadn't been invented yet. The journey back to the galactic core took 3 days, during which time the team struggled to come to terms with what they had experienced. The crystalline device that contained proof of their encounter with the SYTH had become the center of intense discussion and analysis. The genetic templates alone represent technology centuries ahead of anything in the galactic database, Marcus said, studying the device's readouts on his enhanced scanner. If even half of what they showed us is real, we're looking at the most significant advancement in human capability since the development of faster-than-light travel.
That's assuming we can trust them, Stellan said.
She had remained skeptical throughout the return journey, her military training making her suspicious of any offer that seemed too good to be true.
They admitted to killing dozens of humans through their research methods. How do we know this isn't just a more sophisticated form of manipulation?
Because they didn't have to reveal themselves at all, Kira pointed out.
If they wanted to manipulate humanity, they could have continued their covert observations indefinitely. Instead, they chose to make contact and offer partnership.
Mira had remained largely silent during these discussions, focused instead on studying the star charts contained within the SYTH device. The maps revealed regions of space that humanity had never imagined, showing civilization patterns and stellar phenomena that challenged basic assumptions about how the galaxy was organized. But, more than that, they revealed the true scope of what the SYTH were offering.
This wasn't just an alliance between two species.
It was an invitation to join a community of explorers that spanned multiple galaxies, united by shared curiosity about the fundamental nature of existence. Look at this, she said, calling up a three-dimensional map that showed migration patterns across the local galactic group.
The SYTH aren't the only nomadic species.
There are dozens of others, all following similar paths through unexplored regions.
They're part of a network. A network of what? Stellan asked. Consciousness researchers.
Every species in this network has one thing in common: they're all trying to understand the origins and nature of awareness itself.
The discovery they mentioned, the thing waiting in the void between galaxies, it's not just an archaeological find. It's potentially the source of consciousness in the universe. The implications were staggering.
If the SYTH were correct, humanity was being invited to participate in research that could answer the most fundamental questions about existence itself.
Where did consciousness come from? How did non-living matter become capable of awareness and thought? Was consciousness a natural property of the universe, or something that had been artificially introduced?
When they arrived at the space station where their mission had originated, they found it in chaos. Word of their survival had somehow leaked, despite the classified nature of their mission. The docking bay was crowded with officials from multiple galactic governments, all demanding answers about what had happened on Zirion Prime.
This is exactly what we didn't want, Stellan muttered as they prepared to disembark. Maybe it's exactly what we need, Mira replied.
If we're going to propose an alliance with the SITH, we'll need support from more than just human authorities. The debriefing took place in a secure conference room attended by representatives from the Galactic Combat Federation, the Androthi Science Council, the Vorthan Military Command, and several other major galactic powers.
The room's walls were lined with translation equipment, ensuring that every nuance of the team's report would be understood by all attendees.
Admiral Corbin, the Androthi representative who served as the committee's chair, called the session to order.
We understand that your team encountered something unexpected on Zirion Prime. Please provide a full account of your mission.
For the next 4 hours, the team recounted everything they had experienced. They described the systematic nature of the attacks on the mining teams, the discovery of the modified mining complex, and, finally, their encounter with the SYTH themselves.
The reaction was predictably skeptical.
You're asking us to believe, said General Tormesh of the Vorthan Military Command, that these creatures killed human personnel by accident, and are now offering an alliance based on mutual scientific interest? I'm asking you to examine the evidence, Mira replied, activating the SYTH device. The conference room filled with holographic displays showing star charts, genetic templates, and mathematical proofs of concepts that were barely comprehensible to current galactic science. This is impossible, breathed Dr. Villani, the lead xenobiologist from the Kandorian Empire.
These genetic modifications would allow organisms to survive in environments that should be lethal.
Deep space radiation, exotic atmospheric compositions, gravitational fields that would crush normal biological matter. And these star charts, added Admiral Corvin, studying the three-dimensional maps, they show regions of space we've never detected, with stellar formations that don't match our understanding of galactic physics.
Marcus stepped forward. We've verified everything we can through independent analysis.
The mathematics checks out, the genetic templates are theoretically sound, and the astronomical data is consistent with observable phenomena when viewed from the perspectives the SYTHTI provided.
But, why humans? Asked Colonel Zethran, the human representative from Earth's united government. If these creatures are as advanced as you claim, what could they possibly need from our species? This was the question Mira had been hoping someone would ask.
She activated another section of the SYTHTI device, showing behavioral analysis data that the aliens had compiled from their observations of human settlements. According to their research, humanity exhibits a unique combination of traits. We're exploratory by nature, but also highly adaptable to unexpected situations. Most species that develop advanced technology become conservative, preferring to perfect known systems rather than risk exploring unknown ones.
She gestured to the holographic display showing human expansion patterns across the galaxy. In just 3 centuries since achieving spaceflight, humans have established colonies in environments that other species consider uninhabitable. Not because we have superior technology, but because we're willing to take risks that other species won't accept. The SYTHTI and their allies have spent millennia developing incredible technology, but they've become cautious in their exploration methods. They have the tools to reach the discovery they mentioned, but they lack the psychological flexibility to deal with whatever they might find there. General Tormesh leaned forward, his reptilian features showing intense interest. And, you believe this justifies an alliance with creatures that have already killed human personnel?
I believe it represents an opportunity that may never come again, Mira replied.
The SYTHTI are offering to share technology that could advance human capability by centuries.
In return, they want our help exploring something that could answer fundamental questions about the nature of consciousness itself.
Or, Colonel Zethran said grimly, they could be using our exploratory instincts to lead us into a trap. What if this discovery they mentioned is actually something dangerous? Something their own species is afraid to approach directly?
It was a fair question, and one that had occurred to Mira during the journey home. But she had also considered the alternatives.
What's our choice? She asked.
We can refuse their offer and continue expanding across the galaxy at our current rate, using technology that's already falling behind compared to other advanced species. Or we can accept the risks and potentially gain access to capabilities we can't even imagine yet.
There's also the matter of verification, Admiral Corvin added. Even if we wanted to pursue this alliance, how would we establish contact?
You mentioned communication protocols, but implementing them would require revealing our location and capabilities to potentially hostile aliens.
Mira had been expecting this objection as well.
The SYTHTI provided coordinates for a neutral meeting site in unclaimed space. They've also offered to facilitate contact through intermediary species that are already part of their alliance network. She activated another section of the device, showing a complex diplomatic structure that spanned multiple galaxies.
The SYTHTI weren't operating in isolation.
They were part of a confederation of species that had been exploring the deepest mysteries of the universe for millennia. This is bigger than just humanity and the SYTHTI, she continued. They're offering us membership in a community of consciousness researchers that includes species we've never encountered. The knowledge exchange could revolutionize our understanding of physics, biology, psychology, and dozens of other fields. The discussion continued for several more hours, with representatives from each galactic power raising concerns and objections. But, gradually, the focus shifted from whether the offer was legitimate to whether it could be safely accepted.
The genetic enhancement templates, Dr. Villani said, studying the technical specifications, they're designed to be reversible. The modifications could be undone if they proved problematic.
And, the communication protocols, added Admiral Corvin, they include safeguards that would allow us to withdraw from contact if we detected deception or hostility.
Finally, General Tormesh posed the question that everyone was thinking: what do we do if this alliance leads to conflict with species that oppose this consciousness research?
According to the SYTHTI, Marcus replied, such conflicts have occurred before. The alliance includes military support structures designed to protect member species from hostile interference. So we'd be joining not just a research partnership, but a mutual defense pact, Colonel Zethran observed.
That's correct. But also consider the alternative.
If we refuse this offer, we remain isolated while other species potentially gain access to technologies and knowledge that could make our current capabilities obsolete. The debate continued well into the station's night cycle, but eventually a consensus began to emerge. The offer was too significant to ignore, but too dangerous to accept without extensive safeguards.
"We propose a graduated contact protocol," Admiral Corvin announced.
Initial communication through the channels provided, with representatives from multiple species present. If the SYTH proved to be genuine in their intentions, we proceed to limited technological exchange.
Full alliance would require extensive verification and approval from the governing bodies of all participating species.
It wasn't the immediate acceptance that Mira had hoped for, but it was more than she had dared to expect.
The galactic powers were taking the SYTH offer seriously enough to risk formal contact. As the committee session concluded, Colonel Zethran approached her privately. "You realize what you've set in motion here? If this alliance proves successful, it could fundamentally change humanity's position in the galaxy." "I know," Mira replied. "But I also know what happens if we don't take this chance. We remain a minor species, struggling to keep up with civilizations that are millennia ahead of us technologically. And if it's a trap? Then, we face whatever comes next the same way humanity has always faced impossible challenges. We adapt, we persist, and we find a way to survive."
3 months later, Mira found herself aboard a diplomatic vessel heading toward the coordinates the SYTH had provided. The ship carried representatives from 6 different species, all nervously excited about humanity's first formal contact with the Consciousness Research Alliance. The meeting site was a space station of impossible beauty, constructed from materials that seemed to bend light itself into artistic patterns. As their ship approached, Mira could see other vessels from species she didn't recognize, their designs reflecting aesthetic sensibilities that were utterly alien yet somehow harmonious. "Welcome, persistence hunters," came a familiar harmonic voice as they docked. The lead SYTH from Zirion Prime was waiting for them, its crystalline body pulsing with patterns that somehow conveyed joy and anticipation. "We have much to discuss," the alien continued, "and even more to explore together." As Mira stepped onto the station, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had placed 99th in the arena trials, a failure by conventional standards. But that failure had led her to this moment, to this opportunity to help humanity take its next great leap into the unknown.
The arena trials had measured her ability to fight.
But the universe, she was learning, had need of people who could do something much more difficult. People who could build bridges across the vast spaces between minds, species, and galaxies. People who could carry the future in their hands, even when they didn't yet know what shape that future would take. As she walked deeper into the station, surrounded by beings of impossible beauty and wisdom, Mira smiled. She had emerged from the apex carrying its cubs, and now it was time to help them grow into something wonderful.